Here we are back again on what is race day in Indiana for the Indy 500. The Pacers nearly raced past the Boston Celtics, leading by as many as 18 points in Game 3. Ultimately, end up falling 114-111. Led with less than 2 minutes to play. Led by 5, actually, with less than 2 minutes to play. We're going to get into all of that. But I do think that there was a lot of positives from this game. Up until what happened in the last 2 minutes, I was prepared to name this podcast Feck Yeah. I was pretty excited about that title.
That would have been pretty great. I was, as you know, for the pieces I write for you, I write during the game. And so there's more of a positive slant initially. And then when I was like, oh, they're losing it, I had to go back and like kind of edit some stuff. Like, okay, maybe it's not as positive as I thought. Yeah, they lost the thread a little bit in approach, and they had been pushing the proverbial boulder up the hill because of the talent deficit. The Celtics are really good. I think there's a lot for the Pacers. Again, nobody really cares. Nobody wants to hear it. But, you know, if I'm a Pacer fan, I look at a lot of these players and I say, hell yeah. And I wrote it in the piece. You have a guard who 100% can hang in an Eastern Conference Finals, a starting guard. And you picked him in the second round. And his name is Andrew Nembhard. And if there's one thing to be really excited about, it's that he keeps showing up in a big, big way. And he gave you 32, 4, and 9. They lost. I get it. We'll talk about it. But pretty good. Pretty good.
Since you've led with Andrew Nembhard, I told you ahead of time before we got on here that I had an introduction to this that I wasn't sure whether you were going to like it or not. But for people who don't know, Samson and I have recorded a lot of podcasts together over the last 12 months or so. And the first collaboration he did with me on my website was we ate popsicles together. And I've since invited several people over for popsicles as part of my patron-only content that's behind a paywall. And what we started out doing that day is we were comparing our popsicles as flavor comps. And Samson had an orange popsicle, which he compared to Tyrese Haliburton. I had a peach popsicle, which I compared to Andrew Nembhard. We're going to watch this clip, and then I want to get your reaction to it. Nostalgia for me when I buy the peach box, and there's a lot of nostalgic elements I think when you watch Andrew Nembhard and the way that he moves around the court. He's a very bump and swivel player, a word that Rick Carlisle uses that I actually titled one of the articles that I wrote about Andrew Nembhard as he plays with a lot of moxie. And moxie itself is a very nostalgic word, I feel. A lot of guile and moxie to that Andrew Nembhard.
And an addendum, you could add, you like the cut of his jib. You know? That's within.
And I do.
Yeah,
I do. I'm very high on Andrew Nembhard.
He's got good jib. I came on here. One of my very good friends. He actually messaged me today. He didn't even know I was doing this, but I'll find it. He messaged me. He's a huge Andrew Nembhard fan, and this is what I get. He always messages me these random. He says, "Bro, will you be there when Nembhard has a 30-13 playoff game?" I said, yes, Caitlin Cooper's going to put me on staff. Wow. That's funny.
So Andrew Nembhard in this game has 32 points and technically 9 assists, but 16 potential assists. So your friend kind of hit the nail on the head here. So I think the people want to know, Samson, what were you doing when Andrew Nembhard had a 32 and 9 playoff game?
Just watching it, enjoying it immensely. You talked about, bump and swivel. We talked about cut of jib, all that kind of stuff. He is one of the more composed drivers, and I wrote in the piece, like, you can't be the best driver on a team that employs TJ McConnell, but, Andrew Nembhard is really fantastic. On the last podcast episode, I said among the young guards in the NBA, he's one of the best drivers. The only thing that's really missing for Andrew has been the three-point shot. And it looked a lot more promising before he had to go through the injuries at the start of this year. It's come around in a huge way in the playoffs. I think his true shooting at this point must be like 65 over the course of the playoffs. He clearly can run primary actions. He has had a couple tough matchups defensively. There's been some boneheaded fouls, but I think he's a positive objectively on that end. And a guy who can run primary actions in the Eastern Conference Finals, a guy who can defend across a wide array of matchups, including guarding up against some guys and being a point of attack defender against a lot of good point guards. I mean, this is a second round pick, and it's not like it took him a long time to get to this point. We're just a couple years in. He's fantastic. I'm a Pacer, as you well know, Raptors fans know, I was like, if Pascal goes to Indiana, there's one guy I want. I didn't care about the Jarris Walker of it all. I didn't care about Andrew Nembhard. Well, he's great, and I knew he was great, and you knew he was great, and he's still really great. He's awesome.
As you might also recall from that Popsicle podcast, I said I had a secret hot take about Andrew Nembhard that I wasn't going to share for public consumption, but I told it to you. Mm-hmm. You know what it is, and it actually turned out to be somewhat accurate. But speaking, you say...
Not somewhat. Accurate.
You said that Andrew Nembhard in the three-point shot. So Nembhard makes 4 threes in this game. The Pacers as a team made 5 total threes. They get outscored by 33 points from the three-point line. This is very similar, if people don't remember, about 4th or 5th game of the season, the Pacers played the Celtics. They lost by 50 points, in part because they got outscored by 45 points from the three-point line. Also only made 5 threes in that game. Another thing that was similar between the two games is Tyrese Haliburton wasn't available in either. While we're talking about Andrew Nembhard, I want to throw up on the stage and show you what some of Nembhard's process looked like in that game, because he ended up finishing this one with 3 potential assists. Last night he had 16. I admit I did not count as you would have and been more thorough for how many of these were advantage assists. That being said, here's how he was being guarded back in November. The Celtics pretty consistently were ducking under against him, and as you can see, he's not even looking at the rim when that under comes. He's going to dribble right out of it, get off the ball, give it to Aaron Nesmith, and now look at how he runs away from the ball with his back to it. He's not looking to relocate and get the ball back. Now look at some of the possessions from last night in the similar circumstance. For one, he's shooting the ball, as you noted, off the dribble, particularly from mid-range at a very high clip. But the Celtics still did go under a few screens against him. He gets off the ball, staring at Pascal, ready to get it right back, and is prepared to reattack. When he does look off the rim, it's with a purpose to try to shift and manipulate the defenders. And then he's punching it to the rim and getting all the way there.
Look at that pace, yeah. Ooh, he's good.
You can see a lot of these. Tatum under the screen. Now watch Andrew Nembhard. He actually gets that step through. Porzingis is running away to Miles Turner. He's not looking at the rim again. He wants to pass it off. That's back in November. Last night, first of all, he's seeing a lot more overs, so he's able to get right to the rim. That's difference number 1 from what we were seeing back then. Difference number 2, similar situation. Tatum's chasing over. He changes directions and goes to what is now, I think, kind of his signature move of the playoffs, which is that jab step back to the step back from the elbows. Similarly, a good adjustment that the Pacers made is if he's going to see a lot of unders, they were using Pascal with Nembhard. That's actually a flat screen. So it was a step-up screen that Nembhard had the option to go off either side of. That makes it much harder for Drew to be able to duck under, even if he wanted to. Then they're staying attached to Siakam. He's able to get to the rim again. Obviously, some of these help coverages are not very good from the Celtics. But even back in November, here he is. He has the whole left side of the floor to himself against Jason Tatum. The rest of it's cleared out. Again, not looking to attack, staring right at what pass he's going to make. Last night, he gets a step on Jason Tatum, and you can tell he's not even thinking about pausing to look away from that potential matchup. Similar here, another good play from him getting downhill. And this is what I wanted to point out, because the broadcast said many times that what Boston's help coverages were, that Nembhard wasn't seeing a lot of resistance. And the second half, he definitely was, because look at this possession. First of all, Drew is guarding TJ McConnell, and he tagged Miles Turner heavily on that first pick and roll coming up from the high side there, all the way off of TJ. So then he goes and gets a rescreen from Pascal Siakam, and watch Drew again, nexting all the way off of TJ, even though TJ is relocating back behind the ball. And this is he's cupping the ball like a football and getting all the way downhill and drawing that foul late. So I just wanted to show that as a very obvious before and after transformation. And as you noted, at certain points in time throughout the season when Nembhard was struggling or when he wasn't in the rotation, some of that was connected to he never played in preseason because he literally had to get a kidney stone removed. He had back soreness and back spasm issues towards the middle portion. He hyperextended his knee in the in-season tournament. And also they signed Bruce Brown. And as soon as they signed Bruce Brown, and Bruce Brown was the highest paid player on this roster, Nembhard was no longer a starter. And that meant making a choice between TJ McConnell and Andrew Nembhard as backup point guard. Once that trade was made and the roster was balanced out with Pascal Siakam, you no longer have to make a choice. Last night was a case of why not both? And some of that's because Tyrese is out, but TJ and Andrew both having a lot of room to show what they're capable of doing and showing in this game how much depth the Pacers have at the point guard position.
So on catch and shoot threes, he's at 49% in the playoffs. He's taking 0.4 pull-up threes a game. So really, really small sample size, 43% there. But 3 attempts per game, pull-ups, 2-point pull-ups, 48%. That's now if you get into the analytics, these aren't the best looks. That's not hyper efficient, but for the release valve that it is, for the possession saving type of plays he's making, that a lot of players aren't able to, muster that type of efficiency in that type of play. This is unbelievable. And especially he keeps his dribble alive. He can make to a lot of different parts on the floor. And as we saw, I think pretty good nose for recognizing, at least in last night's game early, when Miles and Pascal had advantages to go after. I thought he was picture perfect before the Celtics really got acclimated. And that's, of course, part of the, that's part of it too, is that they have to get acclimated. It took them about, 28 minutes, 29 minutes of basketball. Andrew, as he progresses he'll be a starting guard for a long time. I don't know how high he'll be on scouting reports, all that kind of stuff all the time, but he has to go to counters now. Counters have been successful. He's taken more volume on, been successful with it. What a player. And I'm glad we're talking about something positively to start this off, because there's been a lot of negative covering this series.
It's hard not to talk about this positively for him to have that type of a performance on this stage without Tyrese being able to be out there and play, especially because in January when he came back from the back soreness thing, there was a lot of pushback about why he was getting some of the minutes he was getting, what role he was playing. And you could tell, he came back and played against Denver. I think I showed this whenever Lewis was on here. His handle was a little bit loose, in part because he wasn't being able to do things on off days. That was something that he was going to have to develop. And he wasn't even looking at the rim, kind of like what we were seeing in those clips against Boston. He wasn't looking for himself to be a scorer. And I kept telling people, for one, I can tell that he's not moving, right? Because he's not going to his throw-ahead dribble. He's not using certain moves that he otherwise would have been using. And also, he's a wonderful passer. He just, once the shot would come around and once he was asserting himself more as a scorer, the passing was going to show up more. And there's a clip that I didn't even put in that package because I'm hoping that I'm going to have time to write about it. But what you and I have been talking about, he comes around a handoff in the third quarter and uses his inside hand to throw a head dribble, get the ball out into space, and then catches up with his outside hand. And then in one single motion makes a left-handed pocket pass to Miles Turner right on the money. Those are the types of plays. I knew he could do that as a passer. It was just a question of, will he be able to lead enough as a scorer that defenses will guard him so that those passes show up to the degree that they can? And that's what we really got to see last night. And obviously the offense did hit some bumps at the end of the game for reasons that we can get into here later on, but just wanted to definitely give him his flowers and also get your opinion really quick too on what you thought of just him and Siakam playing off of each other in general.
I thought that was that last possession before. I can't remember if it was the last possession of the first half or the first of I believe it was the last possession of the first half. It was just that Pascal is going middle, catch, hit the mid-range jumper. It looked the exact same as if Tyrese had run the action. And I thought that Nembhard had a great feel for working with his bigs, as I mentioned before, and that extended to Pascal too. This Pacers team, I know Pacers fans, it was an easier road to the Eastern Conference Finals than maybe it would have been ideally for other teams. Injuries are part of it, but injuries played a part. Don't let that sadden you, I don't think, though. Don't let that, because this Pacers team continues to show they have knuckleballs away from their fastball. There is an upside to this team. Maybe it might not be that full, we're in conference finals, we're in the finals, those level of teams type of upside. You have to wait on different types of progression from different players to maybe take you there. But this team has upside, and they've gotten a lot of stuff out of a lot of players. And they've played a lot of different ways, and they've found a lot of different ways to stay in games. And Nembhard is a huge part of that. And credit to him. And working with Pascal in those two-man actions, I think, is huge. The point I was originally going to make is that the Pacers are figuring it out with Pascal how to use him more often. They lost the thread of it a little bit towards the end of the game, but you can see it's more intentional as these playoffs have gone on. And I think these things will be huge going forward for the Pacers. This playoff run should be really meaningful for development and intention about how you build the team.
I like that you said. Oh.
Wait, I have one hot take. Since this is not Toronto territory, but it is hot. Tyrese Haliburton is out of the equation. Just right there. The Indiana Pacers point guard that isn't Tyrese will have a better career than the Raptors point guard, who is about to sign a very big contract, I think. That's something.
I mean, yeah. I heard you on your podcast many times. You and I talked about it, that you liked Nembhard for a very long time. You're like, you talked about prospects. I remember there was one episode that I listened to and we talked about it afterwards where somebody had asked you between Ivy and Nembhard, who you would like better pairing next to Scotty, and you said Nembhard.
He's really good. he's really good. And that's a redeeming quality for Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse loved Nembhard. I thought the Raptors were going to go get Nembhard. They didn't go get Nembhard.
And I can tell you with an aggressive wink that I'm very confident that the Raptors liked Nembhard, yes, both in the draft and last summer. So I'll leave that one there. But I do want to show a little bit of problem solving because I like the way that you termed that. So like this is the end of April where the Pacers were playing the Brooklyn Nets and ended up losing this game. That made it more challenging for them to punch their ticket to get into the playoffs. But this is a play that they run very often, corner. They call it C. Siakam's coming up there to set a touchscreen for Tyrese. He actually gets a switch against Dennis Schroeder. The play is to reverse this to Jalen Smith. The play is further to progress for Pascal to go set the first screen of a stagger for Aaron Nesmith. Then Jalen Smith drops down. Nesmith's going to cut to the opposite wing. They're running this very paint by number, not really getting any advantages here until eventually Nembhard has to throw up a grenade. Last night they tried to run this play, and I could tell that this is what play they were trying to run because it happened pretty shortly after Doug McDermott was seen playing minutes in Game 3 of a playoff series. So they run the touchscreen. The Celtics do not switch it. Then Drew Holiday's really aggressively denying Miles Turner up at the top, so they're not going to be able to get into the play that they want. That stagger's never going to get set for Doug McDermott. So Nembhard ends up giving it to Siakam. He flips around and is like, you know what? I'll just set a ball screen for you. And now it's going to be a two-man game. They start to switch it. They switch back, and Pascal's able to shoot over the top. Like, that's just in-game problem solving from your second-year point guard, that when the actual set play, we aren't going to be able to run it, which you're probably shouldn't expect to be able to run your plays completely to completion against teams that have scouted them all out. To be able to, again, keep the ball on the same side of the floor with Pascal and his point guard and find a way for one of the two of them to get a shot. Problem solving. I liked it.
It was the last time they went to Pascal. Like he missed the layup towards the end. They all converged for that rim contest. But when he got doubled on the post up Derek, Drew came over and he tried to get out of it. Do you have that clip? I
have a bunch of those clips, Samson.
Okay. Well, then I won't ruin it.
No, we can go right there. Let's just go right there. So the clip that I showed you before where Drew Holiday was basically roaming off of TJ and tagging high side on Miles Turner and then nexting off of TJ on Andrew Nembhard's drive, that's something that showed up pretty frequently over the last 2 minutes. And this was why back when the debate was out there in the prior series about whether Rick should have closed with TJ or not, this is the conundrum you get into, because if TJ was going to be guarded by Drew Holiday, it becomes more difficult to be like, hey, let's run the offense through TJ, especially on a night when the two best players, in my opinion, were Nembhard and Siakam. You want to run more of the offense through them. Well, now that TJ's spacing, TJ's not really spacing. So there was a few times where I felt like it just got very wonky, not only in how attached the Celtics were to TJ when he didn't have the ball, but also in terms of where they were positioning players.
I have a bite-sized anecdote just before this.
Okay.
TJ McConnell is the only person who can figure out TJ McConnell's spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Other players cannot figure it out. And other defenses love when they're in that situation. When TJ has the ball, which is what we talked about against the Knicks, not to rehash the full conversation, but why you were weary of it or a bit worried of that approach, closing with him, is that if he doesn't have the ball, it allows other teams to completely separate from him and gum up everything. And only TJ McConnell with ball in hand can start to do the wizardry against his odd spacing that he provides. And it puts the Pacers in a quandary. When we were discussing that, Tyrese was a more limited version of himself, maybe, and you maybe would have liked Tyrese off ball as a shooter with TJ on ball. That isn't the case in this game. Andrew and Pascal, as you said, had been the best too. So, yeah, interesting.
So here's clip number 1. TJ is bringing it up. He gives it to Andrew, and what you'd see that the Celtics had done is they put both wings onto Nembhard and Siakam. So as soon as they engage in a screening action, it's pretty much going to get neutralized because it's just going to be wing against wing again. That makes that pass entry a little bit more difficult. Obviously, the clock's running down quite a bit here, and that puts Siakam in the position where he's going to have to get to that drive. Like you said, they converge. I think there's probably a case to be made where even though the clock is running down, that you want him to make that pass to the opposite corner to Aaron Nesmith probably a little bit sooner when Derek White rotates. So that's a catch and shoot 3. But another point I would make is typically when Pascal's getting the ball at the right elbow where he prefers it to be, and Miles Turner's in the strong side corner, and typically this would be, Tyrese instead of Andrew Nembhard, they create a really wide gap by putting where TJ is. That player would go to the dunker spot. That way, Nembhard could be clear at the opposite wing. You're creating a really wide entry point for Siakam to be able to attack into that space. Too often in this game, if TJ was going to be off ball, they needed to put him in the dunker spot so this would be less congested. I think that would have helped because even as Pascal would have been attacking, he could have potentially made that little drop-off pass to TJ in that situation. This showed up again on another possession where I really just wanted them to use the dunker. So, like, for people who don't know, here's an example of it against the Pistons, where Tyrese is given the ball to Siakam against Fontecchio, Miles Turner there in the ball side corner. The gap is way wider as an entry point when you put somebody in the dunker, which in this case is Andrew Nembhard. Plus, it's a guard then rotating as the rim protector. This just allows Pascal Siakam. Nobody even tries to clamp down on that driving lane with the two of them there. It's possible that the Celtics still want to help off, but then it would have been a catch and shoot 3 between Nembhard and Miles Turner potentially. Here again, like Miles preferably would be in the ball side corner. TJ McConnell would be in the dunker spot. Instead, like you said, Drew is all the way off of TJ McConnell. He's having to string that really far out. And now this just ends up being kind of a heap of nothing, for lack of better terms, until finally Miles Turner ends up going to a step back 2. Like, that's where your margin for error isn't there without Tyrese on the floor as a potential release valve and initiating. The positioning has to be pristine if that's what lineup they were going to play.
And that sucks because we saw the one play where, they create like a terrible angle for that. It's not even a post entry pass, just like an entry pass that Jalen can jump. And then when they actually work to get Pascal works for that position, flashes middle, catches against Derek White. Advantage. TJ's presence and the structure of the floor mitigates everything. Late game, 2 minutes left. If the structure of the floor is in a good place, Pascal's you're getting a really good shot there probably. However, personnel and the balance of the floor takes away in some of the penultimate stuff of this game, takes away advantages that would have otherwise been advantageous.
Yeah, and it's tough because clearly the best 4 players in this game, TJ, Andrew, Siakam, Turner, all score over 20, all have standout moments throughout at different portions. So to say, like, okay, well, if they took TJ off, it might have been Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd's shot wasn't exactly falling. He's not going to penetrate as well as TJ is, but they weren't really using TJ on ball in those situations. The other option would have been Obi Toppin. And while you and I both on the last podcast were like, well, if Tyrese isn't playing, you obviously don't want to be playing a playoff game without Tyrese Haliburton. I want to make that very clear. That's your franchise player. He's this team's best player, but he wasn't going to be hunted on defense as often. Eventually, the Celtics did find somebody to hunt, and it was Obi Toppin, and it was Obi Toppin frequently. So I'm guessing that's why the Pacers were like, well, we're not going to lean in the direction of going bigger, even though Obi provides more as a floor spacer, more in terms of catch and shoot, because they probably wanted to avoid how often Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were hunting him in space. Hence why they got to the lineup that they got. But if that's what lineup they were going to get to, then the role that Nembhard had in many of these spots, which was put him in the dunker spot because Tyrese is going to have the ball in his hands, TJ needed to do the same thing, and they just never got to that.
This opens up not a conversation for this podcast, but whenever this thing ends, you and I will recap the playoffs and do a bit of projecting going forward. These games, I think, provide a really interesting window into how the Pacers can kind of maximize themselves going forward. And I know you see a lot of opportunity for that in how they toggle things, and I see that too. And this, we'll talk about it more in another podcast, but lots to learn.
Something else I want to talk about. The Celtics did outscore the Pacers by 33 points from the three-point line. The Pacers get 68 points in the paint in this game, which was a pretty otherworldly number. But in terms of the three-point line, we know analytically most people are going to tell you that you are not going to influence whether threes go into the hoop or not. You're more so going to impact whether threes are taken or not and from what location they are taken. What did you think of the Pacers' quote-unquote three-point defense? And let me just lead this by saying that Al Horford made more threes than the Indiana Pacers did.
So, good. I don't feel that bad. I actually, right before we started recording, I went back and watched all of Al's attempts. And, they throw a lot of attention at Tatum. Tatum's last 2 assists are those behind the back, the one above the break, the one to the corner. Pretty good passes. And you and I talked about how, we'd like to see, especially myself, I'd like to see more creation from Tatum as a playmaker. That's great. Well done to him. These are plays that he wouldn't necessarily make, getting them to the shooting pocket either. And Al Horford also on the one, in the corner, he put it perfectly in the shooting pocket. But Horford is above the break, catching on the move to his left, finding the center, hitting. There was a couple mix-ups. The one in transition where Pascal left to go middle, and then Horford was wide open for 3. There were a couple. Pascal, I think, was responsible for 3 of those makes. He was guarding them. Maybe a bit less attentive than you'd like. But as far as the ones where they converge, you and I, we can't have our cake and eat it too. And the one episode talk about why are 2 guys converging to Al Horford? And then one episode be well, you have to do everything you can to stop Al Horford. If the guy shoots 7 for 12 and you don't have Tyrese and it's 114 points in the game and that's the guy kind of breaking your back, I thought they played it fine. The Pacers played a good game. Some things don't go your way. I thought that the fix down the stretch was on offense for the Pacers, not defense. I thought they could have scored and won this game because I thought they defended well enough to win this game. And the Celtics made enough bad decisions on offense to allow the Pacers to defend at that level. But that's kind of
I think I largely agree that you probably tip your hat if you get beat by Al Horford making threes. But that being said, I think I can partially have my cake and eat it too.
Sure.
And I'm going to have it. I'm going to have it. So this is the play that both of you and I criticized after game 1, although I did not have the clip of it at the time. And what
we got a brainwave here. That's kind of funny.
What I'll point out is that he popped, and at the same time as the pop is happening, notice that Drew Holiday's making a burn cut and getting out of there. That's removing the next nearest stunt, which means if Tyrese is going to stunt, it's going to be a much longer one. You and I were kind of why is Tyrese stunting here? Just let Miles recover, and if it's a late recovery, then I guess you live with that rather than coming all the way off the corner from Derek White, where you have no chance of getting back against the better catch-and-shoot threat. In this game, lots of pick-and-pop attempts. And what I don't understand completely is I don't really want Ben Shepherd to be stunting aggressively off of Drew Holiday here. But instead of making Miles Turner consistently recover back to the pick and pop, especially after Al had made several of these shots, I will question a little bit why they weren't veer back switching, especially if the on-ball defender was Pascal, was Aaron Nesmith, was Obi Toppin. They're basically just letting him get free points on a lot of these, which maybe that's what you're willing to live with. But I've seen Miles Turner do this to the Celtics as well. And it's once after one of these bigs has made 5+ of these, maybe you adjust that a little bit. So even on this one, some of it too was they were just over helping. Andrew's getting back and recovering in front of the ball here. That's too deep from Miles Turner. Pascal does use a little stunt to try to help Miles to be able to recover back. I think Miles was thinking that Pascal was actually going to rotate to Al, hence why he's a little bit wrong-footed there, because I think he thought he was going to make a different rotation and he didn't. But pretty consistently, like, again, here's Obi Toppin. It's the pick and pop again. I would rather see Obi Toppin veering back right now to Al Horford. Just let that switch occur against Tatum. Instead, it's another pick and pop.
That's a high-level 3 he hit right there.
Here, though, you'll see that Pascal actually does veer back here at the start of the third quarter, and Al does not shoot it. And then you're getting that recovery. Good stunt from Pascal there against Tatum. I'm fine with that. And then that becomes a tough shot from Tatum against Nesmith. I just wish they would have veered back on a lot more of the pick and pops than what they did. Here's one where he's a little bit out of position. Now they're going to rescreen it, get it back. Nembhard, that's better. Problem is when you do veer back switch and it's a guard and it isn't Pascal, it isn't Obi, it isn't Aaron Nesmith, now you're giving up a mismatch. So now Horford's diving against TJ McConnell. And now rather than, the potentially open 3, you're giving up a hook shot from Al Horford over the top of TJ. And the other drawback to that, of course, is if you are going to veer back it, which this is not well executed. You don't want to do it that early. That means that Miles is having to chase and recovery. And credit to Pascal and Miles because they do converge on this. This is where they get the big stop. Tatum misses this layup. And you credited some of Tatum's reads. This was not a good read from Tatum. He should have been throwing it to Drew Holiday much sooner as soon as Pascal rotated off. But they get that stop, then leading to what was, the infamous play of the night. But that's why I think I can have my cake and eat it too. I think that especially when they had 2 bigs involved, if they would have been veering back to Al Horford, at least those would have been contested shots instead of being like, oh, now it's Miles Turner way late in recovery, and sometimes he doesn't even have a hand up.
Yeah. Also, a little credit to Pascal for being there. I think it's like 6 times over the course of the playoffs where we paused the play and we're like, it'd be nice if he was here a little earlier. He got there. Forced what could have potentially been a very big miss, but Drew Holiday absorbed and beat Nembhard to the spot while also strafing the dribble. Just an incredible defender. I was pretty disappointed that Nembhard tried to go right again. He knows who Drew Holiday is, but yeah. I hope the cake tastes good.
I think otherwise too, that there was a number of possessions where they were just over helping in spots. There's Andrew in front of Tatum. Why is Miles Turner all the way off of Jaylen Brown? That's going to be a wide open 3. Again, you have to judge these based on the defense when the shot is going up, not whether the shot goes in or out, because they're not going to have so much effect on that anyways. 2 people jumping at Tatum, and now Al Horford's wide open in the corner. Not ideal, clearly. The 3-point line defense, I do think could have been better. I don't really know why Obi Toppin came all the way off of Jason Tatum 1 pass away here either. I think I'd rather just live with what Andrew Nembhard's going to do there against that mismatch. And then it's a late rotation and Miles ends up fouling him on a 3. I felt like there was quite a few possessions such as that. That being said, I guess this is the opposite of what the Pacers were doing at the start of the year where they weren't helping. And they were locking down the 3-point line at the expense of giving up lots of drives. I guess if I have to have one extreme or the other, there's a lot of feck going on in this defense. This isn't feckless defense. It's just at times it's too much feck. And I guess if I have to choose, I choose the excess feck.
This was my question. Well, I was going to pose it, but you're kind of answering it. It dissuaded Brown and Tatum from those in the lane finishes more so than it had in the past. And while we are showing the makes, they also did protect the paint better. And I think Boston, they scored the ball worse in this game. And I know we're seeing makes, but I still prefer this. I do. And this is maybe a little bit more accessible without Tyrese, but I don't know.
It's interesting.
Just the one slice of cake for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I said I would prefer the excess feck over the feckless staying home and giving up the drives. But this also is feeding into the way that Boston wants to play. They want to get up a ton of 3s and lead into variance and hopefully outscore opponents there.
Boston, they play the wrong way.
Well, that's a debate for another day for a Celtics podcast to have, not for me to have. But we talked about it. You mentioned it lightly, the final, play of question of woe.
Tough.
I kind of want to get your opinion generally. Where are you at on taking a timeout in those types of situations? Should the Pacers have taken a timeout, or would you rather play in the flow and that type of a setting?
I liked flow. I thought that was...
Because I can tell you that whatever you're going to say, the majority of Pacer fans in the internet were very much a timeout should have been called. But
I will come out on the other side. I am flow. You know why I'm flow? Where the hell was Jason Tatum? Flung under the basket. Siakam and Turner both upright. There was room, opportunity, and I think that's why I said I was disappointed Andrew went right. I was disappointed Andrew tried to occupy the middle. You have two bigs who are streaking up. It could have been there. I think that's where it could have gone. That's how I wanted to see the play develop. It's honestly similar to how they drew up Neesmith's final three attempt, right? Everyone was making fun of like, oh, they're running 4 verticals. They're running an NFL play, Hail Mary. But it's like, it's hard to stop 4 guys running straight up the floor, especially if in Andrew's case, in that possession's case, you only need 2 to win. You only need 2 to win. They would have had numbers. I would have liked Andrew to get left, to square, and to see if they had a 2-on-1 coming down the floor with Turner and Siakam. I would have liked it to develop that way. Instead, he brought the help middle. He brought Drew middle. None of the lanes were available. I like them pushing with numbers, no timeout. And Andrew's made a lot of great decisions. I didn't like that one. I felt pretty good about Andrew carrying the ball up the floor with pace, with momentum, with numbers, trying to win the game. They didn't. Drew kicks ass. He's awesome. Not Andrew's best moment, but them's the breaks. That's my take.
I think the two sides of this are the Pacers are at their best when they're playing in the open floor. That's what we've known about them all season. I think where the fan base is coming from is this has happened 3 or 4 times where they've played in flow. They didn't take a timeout and it ended up not going in the Pacers' way. So I will show you the history of these scenarios.
Oh, good. Yes.
Very quickly.
Oh, this game. Always this game.
Well, this is the overtime. You haven't seen this portion yet, Samson. I've usually ended with why it went to overtime.
This game is the Grim Reaper of these Pacers.
But DeMar DeRozan misses a layup in overtime. The Pacers decide not to call a timeout. Andrew Nembhard has the ball. They want to play in flow. 6 seconds to go. Tyrese ends up getting a handoff there from Miles Turner. Ends up being a double clutch 3 with Alex Caruso chasing him. A few days later, they play the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just to point out, they're trailing right now at this point in the game, 112-111, down 1 with 16 seconds to play. The Timberwolves have possession of the ball. They have to foul. Watch how long it takes them to foul, though, Samson. How many passes are made until the Pacers decide to finally foul to give themselves time to potentially score if they need to? Still haven't fouled. There's now 7.2 seconds. Yes. Wow. 6 passes, 7.2 seconds left. Anthony Edwards goes to the line, makes the first free throw. Indeed does miss the second free throw, and they actually secure the rebound on it. Again, the Pacers are going to go the full length of the floor. 6.7 seconds left when Tyrese gets it. They do not call a timeout. Tyrese, looking for the hit-ahead pass, gives it to Aaron Nesmith, and this is when Anthony Edwards almost hit his head on the rim, blocking Aaron Nesmith's shot. I would counter in both situations that we're talking about the Chicago Bulls and we're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, and what I know of both of them, and especially the Bulls playing the Pacers, is these are 2 of the top defenses in the NBA. Certainly, Minnesota is one of the top defenses in the NBA. If Rick Carlisle had called a timeout, you're going to then have to go against the set Minnesota defense with 6 seconds left to hopefully get to, a pick and roll between Tyrese and Miles. I don't know what you get out of that. My greater issue with this one when this occurred was when the head-to-head pass goes and Aaron gets it, there's enough time there that he's seeing that 2 people are coming to him when he's charging to get to the rim. Yep. Make this pass right now. The entire defense was loaded to the ball side of the floor. If he gets it to Andrew Nembhard, there's plenty of time to catch and shoot there. Mm-hmm. Or if you use even like a middling shot fake and you can decelerate, which is something that Aaron kind of struggles with. He's not like a drag the toe guy. Mm-hmm. And to be able to decelerate, he probably would have drawn contact here and they likely would have been a foul. Overall, I don't have a problem in either situation that Rick didn't call a timeout against those two opponents. But if you want to weigh in on either of those scenarios before we look at last night's, feel free.
So against the Bulls, they were down 3, which changes it. You saw that when Pascal and Miles got caught up to the play, everything flattened out above the break because that's what they're trying to do, get a 3-pointer. They have to create space for one of the guards to shoot. So that's different in approach because if they were down 2, one of Miles or Pascal probably could have broke for the rim, and especially with Tyrese on the floor, suddenly a lot of different types of hit-aheads are available, and that's why Tyrese made the pass to Nesmith, the correct pass that put Nesmith in a winning position, I think. Playing in flow like that, you get tons of opportunities that you won't get in the half court, even if you have a wizard of a coach drawing up, an incredible ATO. Players win games, and players just have to make plays when they have advantages. I don't think Andrew made a winning play, despite making many, many, many of them, and despite me loving him as a player. I think Nesmith got beat by Anthony Edwards ascending to heaven, and he could have made the pass, but I don't mind that from Nesmith either. I don't get it off the glass, see what happens. It just so happens Anthony Edwards was shot out of that like a military jet. An incredible feat of athleticism, gumption, feck, whatever you want to call it. And
I have a lot more issue with why it took 6 passes to
yes,
foul
100%.
an opponent than I do with what the shot attempt was, because just by the numbers, inefficient transition offense is still more efficient than half court offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
people have too much reverence for coaches. This always bugged Evan when I would say this, and Ed Elliott to some degree, and maybe you, and maybe whoever listens. But I'm just like, everyone's like, when the players do something good, they're like, yes, good players. And when the players do something bad, it's like, why didn't the coach jump onto the court and make it happen? And honestly, I guess, I thought the ATO, the 4 verticals, I don't know what they call it in house, but I thought the ATO that the Pacers ran was fine enough. Nesmith had a look. It's not the best shot for Nesmith, but
if you're going to get a shot from somebody on the floor in that situation and they're going to be in the air, moving to their right as a movement shooter, who would you want to take in that shot? Aaron Nesmith or Doug McDermott?
Well, Doug McDermott, of course.
And Doug McDermott was on the floor, and they had him running the other route to clear space for Aaron. That was a little confusing for me.
Maybe that was built in with he's going to get more attention. That could have been it. So, but what I mean to say is that they played in flow. I like when players play in flow. And I think flow, I don't know, I'm sure somebody has done the look at it. I would probably wager that flow scores more points per possession than ATOs.
And in the game situations?
Yeah.
I will say, let's look at the one from last night then, after this occurs on the pick and pop and Miles and Pascal get the stop at the rim against Tatum. As you mentioned, Tatum is on the ground, and Pascal is not upright. Miles is.
Yeah.
I think this is where most people got frustrated because this is a 1-on-4. So technically they are going to have numbers, but at this point in time, they clearly do not. What the Pacers automatically do, I can let people know that when they're in transition, especially with Andrew or Tyrese, what they're normally going to do is they're going to go across the grain of the court intentionally. That's why Andrew's going to his right, because they look to do a quick pitch to Miles Turner as a trailer at the top of the key. And in all honesty, that likely would have been an open look, because with Aaron sliding down the 3-point line, Jaylen Brown's going with him. If Andrew gets off the ball right here and makes that pass to Miles, Miles is probably stepping into a 3. But he takes an extra dribble toward the right. I don't even have that much of a problem with Andrew going right, honestly, just because I know that's what they typically look to get when they're in the open floor. That's almost always the first option, is they're looking back at whoever the 5-man is the trailer. And if it's Miles, they're looking for a trailer 3 there. If they don't get it, then they fake the handoff and will continue going downhill for what's normally on the other side of the floor. Like when you think about how transition offense schemes, the nearest person to the ball takes the ball. The next nearest person to the ball takes away the ball side hit head pass. In this case, there wouldn't be one of those because no one's running with Andrew. And the furthest person back takes the basket. Typically, that's a big. what the Pacers are trying to do a lot of times when they're going across the grain of the court is they want to create a two-side fast break where the person filling the wing and filling the corner is hopefully going to get 2 closeouts. That's what they're attempting to do there. It just didn't get executed well, and also Drew Holiday's just kind of awesome. Like, I kind of am willing to leave it there that Drew Holiday's just kind of an awesome player at applying full court pressure. That's his signature move. Like, I don't have a huge issue with the fact that they didn't call a timeout, because if Andrew doesn't take one extra dribble, there's a good chance that everybody's like, yeah, that was awesome. Miles just made a trailer 3.
Also, egg on my face. Pascal fell. I completely forgot that. So, which takes away the premise I was promoting. So, as you said. But yeah, I like flow better than timeout. But
that's where I would land too.
Yeah, them's the breaks.
Any other things that you noticed about this game that you wanted to talk about?
I
guess I probably should give credit to Miles Turner, because I was fairly hard on him on the prior podcast. And at least to start the game, he was being very aggressive against the smaller guards and shooting over the top. Although I will say, after he had done that 2 times in a row, sometimes he can be a little bit autopilot with the post moves. Derek White read that the whole way, and he ended up getting his shot blocked on one of them by Derek White. Then Drew Holiday forced him, and not in the way of I am Siakam and I'm stringing out the help. Drew Holiday forced him into a couple of negative dribbles and ended up getting a steal. And then in the second half, they ran like a stack pick and roll, and they switched it all. And I don't think that Derek White should probably get 2 blocks against Miles Turner in the same game. That being said, in terms of them not just playing tall, but actively looking to play big, they were definitely looking to play bigger than what they did in game 2 in Boston. And I do give him credit for that. And I do give him credit that a lot of times in the post, he is going to weaponize his touch. And that's what he did early on when he was making the shots. So I didn't talk much about Miles on this podcast, so I should give the credit there.
I'm going to come out on the other side, actually. I know 9 for 16 is a nice number, and I really loved Miles' first half. Like, I thought he was really great, and so much of what you said is why I really liked it. The 5 turnovers, 1 assist, especially in the second half.
This is the second game of that. I mean, in the prior game, he had more turnovers than he had rebounds.
He, killed their offense multiple times. And it's not even necessarily in the turnovers, but in the lack of assists as well. As he was getting the ball with advantage a lot, because of the different type of coverage that Nembhard started to see, right? A little bit more attention. Turner had opportunities to make plays, not just as a scorer, but as a guy who's has the ball with advantage. And that was just, he was completely bereft of good decision-making in the second half. It was really, really tough to watch that happen, because it seemed to me like the Celtics knew, okay, if the ball goes here, we still have the defense, we still have the play in front of us. And Turner in the first half, really proactive, cutting to the rim, catching, taking it all the way there. Little touch shots over the top.
And to be fair, some of that was happening against O'Shea Brissett, and he wasn't.
Yes.
He didn't have that opportunity in the second half.
Yes. And 4, I think, touch shots, little faders in the post, well done to him. But that aggression was kind of snipped a little bit. And then also on top of that, if a dig came, he wasn't being very, there wasn't much attention to detail and keeping the ball high. It's getting low. It's losing where the second level of defense is showing you coverage from. It just.
Well, he had the one really impressive drive in semi-transition where he went to the right to left cross with a hesitation. And then later on, he kind of flew too close to the sun, because he tried to drive again when Siakam was wide open above the break, faked the pass to Siakam, put the ball on the floor, and like you said, the dig came, and he still tried to go through it. I don't think Miles Turner has quite the handle to be navigating through that type of a type space, rather than just making the quick reversal to the open player. And that happened a couple other times too, where Siakam, I didn't feel touched the ball soon enough. He'd have a mismatch against Derek White, and the next thing you know, now his pickup points pressed clear outside the free throw line when he had deep position for a solid 3 or 4 count before he actually got the ball. So
Pascal having 6 assists in this game wasn't so much a product of oh yeah, we're running high pick and roll with Pascal. Tyrese isn't here. He's the main engine. It didn't work out that way. Pascal was mostly making plays with advantage through the post. There's going to be a handoff here and there. The one throw ahead to Nesmith where Nesmith turned it into I believe, a pull-up 2. If I remember correctly, that's that's an assist in name, but that he didn't assist much there. But Turner's inability in this game to relay advantage and size into playmaking opportunities just wasn't there, and really showed up once the Celtics started to kind of like key in on other guys. So tough, very good first half, very underwhelming second half. Them's the breaks.
Yeah, and that's why I said even some of the stuff in the first half, while I'm glad that they looked for those advantages, and that's part of the reason why they had 68 points in the paint, it's still to the point where, like, I just don't think that Derek White should probably block your shot 2 times in a game. Yeah, and that's in part because it's autopilot. It's like I said, he knew on the first 2, I used my quick spin, I just faced up and I shot over the top in the mid post. So the next time, third time in a row, Derek White's like, oh, I know that's exactly what move he's going to do. And sure enough, before he had felt the defense, he already did it. And now Derek White's blocking the shot. Or like in the second half on the other one, you don't really need to use a spin move on the roll there. That allowed Derek White to catch up and then be able to get in the air. Like sometimes that's what he does. His feel for the game, while it has improved, still isn't completely where it always needs to be. Sometimes he predetermines what he's going to do before he even has the ball, and that's what can lead to some of the turnovers and outcomes that we saw in this particular game.
Yeah.
Even though it was better than the prior game.
And a little disappointing thing that it doesn't make the player, but it's you watched, I think there were 2 games through the first 13 games that playoff games that Ben Shepherd had played that he didn't make a 3. And he had been shooting over 40%. He had been giving some defensive utility, to be sure, a couple extra possessions here and there by like pushing for the glass over the course of however many playoff games. He's 0 for 9 from 3 against the Celtics. Tough.
And a lot of those are open shots. Like he was getting open shots last night.
That's tough. And that's one of those guys who like maybe could have helped swing something. But again, like Ben Shepherd's young. This is first try at it. He brings the effort. He brings the things he can guarantee. It's just like the shot isn't falling. That's been like tough.
He had a number of standout defensive possessions, and I understood why they put him into the starting lineup, and especially to keep, Andrew Nembhard and TJ constantly being able to be at the controls of the offense. Were you at all surprised that there was Doug McDermott, Jason Tatum stopper at the end of a quarter, and there was also Doug McDermott getting a tip-in shot and Doug McDermott running routes at the end of a game instead of taking a 3?
Yeah, I was surprised. The tip-in, I was like, because I was hardly tracking it. I was just kind of watching the game, and I was like, Doug? Got a tip-in? But quickly on Ben. Ben was awesome against the Knicks, too. Like, he was a pivotal player in that series. But yeah, Doug.
Well, because at the top, when you were talking about positives and all the things that the Pacers have and where they can go, is that while we're talking about injured teams, not much has been said about the fact that the Pacers have not played a single playoff game with Bennedict Mathurin either, which brings a lot of interesting points to all of this in terms of Andrew Nembhard, Ben Shepherd, Bennedict Mathurin, where all of that fits together next year, and the fact that, Jarris, another promising person who's not going to be playing in these games either, and that they have talent on the bench that's not playing for reasons that are understandable. Obviously, an injury is very understandable. But I do think that's another thing to be looking at the Pacers in a favorable way headed into next season.
It took 632 games for Buddy Hield to make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
That's why people were constantly telling me that he and Tyrese were losing players, Samson. Despite the fact that the Pacers were handedly winning their minutes when the 2 of them were on the floor, and that their defensive liabilities, I was being told all season that both of them are losing players.
So there is not a genre-defining wing or anything like that, but I suspect there's a 3-and-D player who has been like extremely important to championship-winning basketball. Like the first 400 games of his career, he didn't make the playoffs, I don't think. And he also couldn't play away games because he had to stay and serve prison time. His name is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You don't know it until you see it. Like winning players, guys can win games like a lot.
To be fair, though, like That's one thing that I will say. I hate absolutes about the playoffs. I hate it when people say, like, you can't win that way in the playoffs. You need this type of player to win in the playoffs. But if there is like an archetype of a player, non-star, that almost every playoff type team can use, isn't it a movement shooter who can guard ones?
Mm-hmm. Also, this is also a cool thing to pay attention to bring it back to Andrew, because I like talking about Andrew. Guards who can shoot and guards who are comfortable with physicality.
Mm-hmm.
I put money on those guys to have an outsized role compared to what you see in the regular season. Comfortability with physicality, that's a big reason why Nembhard has been able to like assume more of a role and more usage, because the physicality goes up, that comfortability stays there to push through, to meet those moments. And those guys are really important, but also, movement shooters. There's a reason Buddy Hield just stepped in and went 6 of 9 one game. We did not, looking at the numbers here, get that from Doug McDermott.
I mean, in a way, the two archetypes we just discussed could very well be Nembhard and Ben Shepherd at some point in time for the Pacers. Both of them have some of those skill sets. If there's any form of physicality that I still want Nembhard to embrace, it's when he gets to the rim and uses like the Rondo fake or another fake and gets his defender in the air, and then he doesn't use the shot fake. He uses the shot fake, but he doesn't actually use it to his advantage to draw contact. He did that once or twice against Derek White last night, where I'm like, you probably could have been in a line there.
You know
you
what
didn't.
I think it is?
You passed out of it.
I think it's because he's such a big decel last step guy. That's probably why. Like,
a lot of times it turns into a fadeaway. It's like you have the guy in the air, and then he's either fading backwards or he'll continue to make the full Rondo donut, and then he'll pass out of it on the pivot.
Certain packages lend themselves to tangential packages. I'm actually quite similar to Andrew in how I approach attacking the rim. And so,
or is it just that you have, you just don't want to be a grifter?
I hate, I don't like that. Yeah. But so in my mind, I'm like, these are things I'm pretty uncomfortable with, like the pump fake around the rim too, unless I'm playing out of the post or something like that. But I will finish with that big right, decel into that left, and little push a lot. And it's tough to turn that into anything meaningful outside of like a skip pass or something like that, or a little dump off. But yeah, maybe I'm projecting too much of myself onto it.
I'd like to know how often you're playing in the post.
I'm gonna go play basketball. You get ask a leg. Wait 1 second. 1 second. A leg. Come here. How am I as a post player?
As a post player?
Yeah.
What's the Samson scouting report?
Low key, like very low rider, and then you kind of on me, because I'm so much lighter than him. So hold on, actually I should be here. Because I'm so much lighter, you just basically just go down to the rim, and then just give me some elbow touches, and it's tough to deal with, It's tough to deal with. It's pretty good. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate.
No, I was like, she asked how often I play in the post, and it's basically just against you.
Yeah, it's a mismatch. It's out because he's bullying me because he knows he has 30 pounds on me, and I don't have the frame to withstand his like bruising. So he actually doesn't really have a post game. He usually just, when he sees me, he's like barbecue chicken. And
I thought you were going to say that he mostly faces up and then just tries to get the lower driving angle.
That's it.
Them's the breaks. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Thank you. That's my post repertoire is basically when a leg is around.
I just want people that are listening to this to know that for like 2 years, Samson would not tell me anything about pickup games, his actual game. He would just share like a stat and then tell me nothing about what occurred or what happened. So this is probably the most actual insights on his game as a basketball player that I've ever gotten. It usually has to come from me asking Trey or asking S to relay it to me.
You've seen me play basketball.
From your public Twitter clips, like anytime in text conversation when I ask you, you do what you always do in text conversation, which is like 2 words or you don't say it.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I played in the post a lot. People know this. There's a video of me on the Ringers website talking about how I owned a Jermaine O'Neal DVD that he had made called Better Basketball, and I worked those post moves. I did that all the time. I'm 5'6". I weigh like 115 pounds, and that was where I lived, Samson.
What's your favorite post move?
People should know we ran a shuffle motion offense, so there was basically no room in that offense for me to ever post up unless I was running off a double ball screen underneath and catching it there. But it was typically an up and under. I like to be on the left block, face up and under, one dribble to the rim.
So I liked facing the baseline. That's what I liked. The throw into space and catch middle, pump. So I'm on my left, pump. If you get it like that contest, then the up and under. That's my favorite post move. But otherwise, you can just because I'm ambidextrous, you can just go take it to the grindstone, shoulder to chest, get up there and hit the.
See, this is the other thing that we have in common, because you're right-handed, but you play basketball left-handed, and I'm left-handed, but I play basketball right-handed. So do you prefer the right block or the left block?
The right.
And you want to turn middle.
Yeah.
See, I would prefer being on the left block and turning baseline. And then I would like to get under the basket and go to reverse to my right. I would do that.
Can I also say something?
Mm-hmm.
It's a real shame that you spurn. God creates these beautiful left-handed hoopers, and you spurned him. How dare you?
People can blame my mom for this. I'll tell the story briefly. So I was like 6 or 7 years old, and as you know from one of our prior mailbags, when I was like 11, I was keeping very detailed stats on myself. This was pre that. So I was on my driveway.
Nuts, by the way.
I was on my drive, and those stats were meaningless. That did nothing to improve me at all. Like if you look at it now, it's hilarious and a waste of my time. But anyways, I was on my driveway, as most people in Indiana grow up playing at home on their driveways with their hoop. And I was getting very frustrated, and I took basketball very seriously from the time I was a kid. I wanted to get better and improve. My dad was a coach, but my dad did not coach me. Like, unless I asked him for help or was like, hey, I want to do this drill, he tried to stay out of it as much as he could. But my mom was out there.
Funny because my dad wasn't a coach and he had to coach me.
But yeah, so like we would go to open gyms, and if I wanted his help, he would help me willingly, but we just never wanted that type of relationship. But my mom was watching me, and she played basketball and is left-handed and shot left-handed. And she was watching me. She's like, Kate, I just don't think you should be shooting left-handed. She's like, I think this is the problem. She's like, I think you're stronger with your right. And I was so frustrated at the time. I was like, sure, fine, whatever. That's what I'll do. And from that day forward, I was just a right-handed basketball player. I've asked my parents, looking back at it, because like I was a one sport athlete. I only played basketball, but I was like, when I was growing up and like I was playing softball or other things just for fun, like was I throwing a ball with my right hand or with my left? And no one can remember. So I don't really know.
Well, you throw something now.
You're right. And I would play all sports with my right. I would putt with my right. I play tennis with my right.
It was similar for me, because when you're small, you have to you don't have a shooting motion. You have you push the ball towards the rim. And so what Mr. Cameron, my gym teacher, he looked at me pushing with two, because I was a small kid. I didn't grow until, maybe I was 15 or 16. And I was pushing with two, and he was like, which hand do you shoot with? And I was like, I don't know. And I looked at it, and it looked like my left hand was more center than my right hand. So I was like, I guess I'm left-handed. And then eventually, my hand started to creep over and get more center. But now I actually, my elbow flares out because I have no feeling in this finger. So I have trouble. I have nerve damage. I can't anchor the ball on the end of my left hand. So my guide hand is more involved in my jump shot now. But my
guide hand was never involved enough. My guide hand was always dropping off. And it was a lot of my shooting hand. Yeah. That was something I had to work. But would you pull up going to your left or going to your right? What are you more comfortable doing?
Very comfortable going right. That's very comfortable with the snatch back. You see Jaylen Brown do it a lot of the time. It's like that gather snatch. Darius Garland does it. Very comfortable in the hardened footwork bag as well. I prefer going to the right for sure.
See, I wasn't a guard, so I very rarely had opportunity to do that. I played as a wing and I played as a big, despite the fact that I'm 5'6". But if I would have pulled up going to my right. even though I'm right-handed. So
Emmanuel quickly.
there you go.
It's all about how your lower body, like the composition. Yeah.
So basically, what I'm telling you is I'm LeBron. LeBron and I are both left-handed,
Yes.
but he pulls up going to his left, so that's really not that similar. But anyways, I'm sure everybody was very fascinated by the quirks and nuances of our respective games, despite the fact that I'm very confident that you are a lot better than I was comparatively. But
there's no reason for you to say that.
Because it's accurate. I know enough now. Do you want me to drop the things that I know on this podcast?
No.
I didn't think that you would. I already put you through watching us eating the popsicles from the beginning.
That was pretty funny, though. Like, also,
you're gonna have to tell your friend that. You're gonna have to show him that clip. He's gonna laugh.
He watches. What's the last thing he messaged me? Because it's the same friend. He's also, what did he say? Let's see. Or yeah, he just messaged me. He was like, "Send me timestamps of you talking about Nembhard." For the podcast, and then he messaged me the other day. He was like, "Ooh, this Nembhard gas." Yeah,
he's gonna be thrilled with this episode. I feel.
Agreed.
And we got a leg appearance, a cameo. Like, I think people should be pretty happy with this.
A leg is also a lefty, but all lefty, no right, just everything on the left side.
So he's left-handed, and he also plays left-handed.
Yes, like he's the ultimate lefty.
Is this why you guys are dominating 3-on-3 tournaments? Because you have a proliferation of lefties?
There's a guy, he played at Colorado, I believe.
You're like Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox out there?
No, we have like a very guard team. Because Trey is like 6'3", but he plays more so like... You can tell he loved Carmelo Anthony growing up. Like,
so he just jabs stepping on the block?
Oh, he loves it so much. And yeah, a leg is like 6'1", and I'm like 5'11", probably. Not like the short guy saying he's 5'11". I know people say that height doesn't exist. I get it, but yeah, we play fast. Although we did use this year the 3-on-3 thing you sent me for last year.
My play work? Did it work?
Yeah, of course.
I wish I had the clip to throw up here so that people could see it. Virtually, what it was is the ball handler dribbles off the pick. And then instead of using the big to go into a rescreen, it becomes a handoff. And then the guard gets to the middle. And then because it's 3-on-3, you pass it, ping it to the opposite corner. A tremendous play. Something that I think with how much bigs are playing as ball handlers, the NBA teams could do in 5-on-5 settings, especially like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, you could pull that off with. I feel pretty confident that you could have De'Aaron dribble off a pick from Sabonis. And then instead of going into the rescreen, have De'Aaron pivot into his own defender, hand it back to Sabonis to then dribble off his left downhill. You could do that.
Yeah.
Which one of you guys were doing those roles? Was it for you to be the ball handler?
No, I was the first ball handler and then the pitch back. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fun. Interesting to try.
Just so people know as background, this is what I was doing while I was unemployed for a month last year. Finding 3-on-3 clips for Samson's tournament.
Yeah. Good
times.
Yeah.
But anyways, this has been a long aside of banter. Hopefully people just like hearing about general basketball at least from me, who's nowhere close to playing professional basketball. I did win a 3-on-3 tournament once, though. I do have that claim to fame. That's another thing that's what the picture is on the Ringer video. If people watched it, I'm standing there. That's Damon Bailey. I was at his camp. Damon Bailey was the all-time leading scorer in state history, and I won his tournament, and that's why the photo was there. So there we go. But I never played in another 3-on-3 tournament. I knew to get out. I retired after I had won one. I'm like, don't need to do that again. I'm at the mountaintop. But anyway, so game 4 for the Pacers coming up. It will be much more Pacer centric. If they win, we'll have another podcast like this. If they lose, which I just want to point out and say, even if they do lose and this is a sweep, this particular game, and hopefully that's what you got from this podcast, I was not overly disappointed by it. Do I wish, for the sake of the Pacers, that they had won that game after they led by as many as 18? And really, from a narrative standpoint, after they've kind of been clowned for winning playoff games against injured teams, for them to have gotten that win, if they had, without their best player, I think would have tied a really nice narrative bow on what this run has been. That being said, I still think I still think that if you watched all of the film and the things that we talked about here, there's reasons to think positively about the Pacers headed into next season and things that they've gotten out of this playoff run, regardless of what the general consensus and opinion has been about the Pacers up until this point.
The key to look at the players who played big, who had utility. Look at that rather than saying the Pacers are an Eastern Conference team or an Eastern Conference Finals team. Don't get in that Hawks situation. That's trouble. Yeah.
That's fair. And that's something we'll dig into. Like I said, if they lose, I'm going to bug Samson to do at least one more of these with me, and we'll wrap all of that up nicely. So thanks everybody for listening. If you did listen to the rest of this, there will be timestamps if you didn't want to hear everything that we talked about over the last 10 minutes, but we'll see you after game 4.